Hello, welcome to a weird day for this, isn't it? Odd, Monday, 2:30. Time wrong, day wrong, end of the year, oof, icky. Anyway, welcome. We're going to spend the next hour, well, ish, I'll explain in a minute, talking about Capture One. We're going to be editing your photos, that's the most important part. Also, we're going to edit one of mine, weirdly today, end of year, why not? But we're going to edit your photos and fix or enhance or improve or answer any questions that you may have with your images that you've sent in over the last week. Isn't that fun? So for those of you that don't know, that program there, Capture One, that little logo above me, is the raw processing software that is written by the clever guys in Copenhagen. The raw processing software being the piece of software, or the bit of glue as it were, that takes the content from your camera, the sensor that's taken all the light through your lens. That stuff gets stored as a raw file, and the raw processing software allows us to export it or to finish that file in a way that can be printed, that can be seen on screen and whatever, but hopefully more resembles what you remember seeing. The reason being that your camera's raw data is often a bit flatter than what our brain interprets as what the scene is, and we use software to enhance it. Your camera is capable of doing that enhancement itself when it stores something as a JPEG. Typically, it's actually gone through a little profile, but we can do or take a lot more control using software like Capture One over our images. There we go. Really simple. So few, I guess, housekeeping things. Those of you that have been on here for a long time, you know all this. It's the end of another year. Hooray. This is the last broadcast of 2025. Sorry, or well done, you made it. Next one will be in January, which is quite cool. For those of you that have not been on here before, please bear in mind that this is meant to be interactive. So do heckle, challenge, question. We've got some questions in today. I'll try and answer as many as we can. This may be a little bit shorter today as our normal hour. The reason is because I've just finished packing. I need to be in Australia in about 24 hours time, and I just worked out that my flight is an hour before I thought it was. So we'll be off quickly. Right. So for those of you that are using Capture One, you should be on, hopefully, the latest, which is 16.7.2 still at this point. Whether that's the last update of the year, I'm not sure. I know they were talking about some Sony A7 V compatibility updates. But as it is, that's the current version of today. You do not have to be on the latest version. Most of what we're going to run through today is perfectly fine on a previous version, but bug fixes, operating system support, camera support, new features, all that stuff mean that if you can, try and be on the latest version. If you can't, that's okay, but just bear in mind there will be a growing gap from what we're showing you on the screen today and what you might have installed. If you do not have anything installed, Capture One wise, then go to captureone.com, download a free trial, see what you think. Hopefully we'll cover some of that today. Right, for those of you that are wondering, ready for next year, because it's too late now, this is how you get files into us, through there. Oh, God, it's going to be one of those broadcasts, isn't it? Sorry. paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. It's not that difficult to read, is it? Go to that page. You will be able to upload your files, whether it's an EIP, which is a package from Capture One with your edits, whether it's the raw file, whether it's a JPEG and a RAW or whatever else. Please include your name. In the last 3 weeks, naughty, we have included people's images, including this week, that have not sent in their name. We've worked out their name, but that's not our job. It's your job. Tell us your name. It's really simple. In future, next year, there we go, telling off. No name, no picture. So let's get going into Capture One. Before we go in there, let's just quickly talk about in the next 2.5 weeks, we're not going to be broadcasting live. You can still go onto there. So the Facebook group that we have set up, little group, it's very closed, it's very private, it's very curated. There is a no, whatever you want to insert word there, rule in terms of behaviors, but we'll try and answer questions in the meantime between now and when we're next online, but that will cover lots of things about Capture One, but also photography in general and random passive-aggressive photography cushions that I found last week. So back to our Capture One world. Let's cover a couple of little questions quickly. Philip made it Because it's not Tuesday. See, we need to talk about this, don't we, collectively? What day do we want next week or next year? Do we want a Tuesday? Do we want a Thursday? Monday? Kind of fun. Who knows? Where are we? Prasad, yeah, better you move closer to one of the airports. I have moved closer to one of the London airports. I moved about 20 minutes closer, so it's now was definitely less than 3 hours away. That's good. And yeah, it's not brinkmanship, Tony. It's have faith. Because I don't. Right. Roads will be clear. All good. Let's go into Capture One. Capture One being this interface. Beautiful. And that gives us our browser on the right-hand side of images, our tool collections and our tabs on the left-hand side. That tool collection of tabs up here, if you want these things to be bigger, you can say, I want icons and text, and you'll unfortunately run out of space, but you've got obviously this little arrow here for the other ones. If ever you want to know what these are, you don't actually have to do that. You can just hover and it will tell you. That's the retouch tab, and you can organize these however you choose. That's one of the beautiful things with Capture One. You can place the tools on the right, you can put the browser on the bottom, all of this sort of stuff. But the most important thing, I think, is that you can customize your workspace, your toolbar, to the exact workflow that you want, not the one that Adobe prescribed. It's end of year, why not? Right. So, fun one. So I actually mentioned this on both Instagram and on our Facebook group about shooting what I used to. I think years ago. I'm talking like 2009, 2010. I joked and called this Through the Keyhole. There used to be an old TV program called Through the Keyhole, and it's sort of stuck. We quite often refer to this as Through the Keyhole now. This is Durdle Door in Dorset, and interesting. Someone's just mentioned. Where are we? Winter Solstice, very short daylight hours. Wait a couple of months. And Ian, thanks for going over the Into the Sun images. So here's a fun one. Number one, the busiest day on Durdle Door Beach for photography was this Saturday just gone. I was not there, just to be clear, because I steer clear of Durdle Door Beach on this particular Saturday. The reason being that obviously there is a timing to be had in terms of getting our sunrise through Durdle Door's hole. Durdle Door itself is a rock formation, very old rock formation. If I just go to one without the sunrise, let's just pull up the shadows. There's a bit of a hint to what we're going to be doing later, but you'll get a sense of, it's quite a cool rock formation. Very unique, very iconic, overused, overshot, all the other stuff. But at a certain time of the year, the sun pops up right the way through the middle. Now, the problem with this is twofold. Number one, quite often you get a marine layer, which is this bank of cloud out here that tends to sit towards Poole, which is in the east. So one thing to bear in mind, and we talked about this, funnily enough, the group that, or a few people that I was with this week, or last week, been a while, don't check the weather for where you are. Yes, you can if you want to, but that just determines whether you're going to get wet. Check the weather for where the sun's coming up or the sun's going down, because that will tell you whether the sun is going to make an appearance. And in this case, Poole was actually quite clear, but it did have low cloud, unfortunately, out on the sea. Now, what that means is you do not get quite you can actually see in here, I'll show you. At the point the sun actually rose, it didn't quite work, because we had this big band of cloud here. It started to peak out here. That's pretty decent, but it took a while for it to really start to glow. Now, because of that, what happens is you get this little weird group of photographers along here in a little line, because there's this one little sort of keyhole shot, and there's about room for maybe 3 or 4 photographers together. And what you'll find, if you watch it from up on top of the hill, you'll find them move like a little band of ants. As the sun comes up and turns, or moves, or the earth moves in theory, that portal of light starts shifting along the beach, and it starts going this way. And as it does, the photographers start shuffling this way. And all of a sudden, the photographers that started out owning their space have to be nice, because they have to cooperate in order for this to work. Now, that works when there's 3 or 4 people. When there are 20, 30, on Friday morning there was probably 35, 40 people, and that wasn't even the weekend. What happens is people think that this only applies on the winter solstice. It does not. This works for about 2 to 3 weeks either side. you can shoot this during most of December and into January, certainly the first week or two of January. There is no need to hustle and hassle, in fact, even on that one Saturday that everyone has off around the winter solstice. Chill out. You can still see the sunshine through the Durdle Door for a long, long time. So, the reason, though, that we're going to talk about this edit today is because this is actually one of those impossible shots. And I don't mean impossible to capture. Obviously, we've captured it. I mean impossible to get right in camera without some form of editing. Unless you had, let's say, an ND filter that was the exact shape and distance correctly from Durdle Door itself. We'll talk about why in a minute. The other thing to bear in mind, everyone's down there for this shot. One of my favorite, these are all out of camera, by the way. None of these have been edited. This was 2 days later. Awful conditions, in theory. I love this. Look at this line of water matching that line of cloud. And most importantly, because this was done using something called frame averaging, I can pull up all of the detail into here. I can actually lift up our exposure. I'm going to turn on my exposure warning, appear on the toolbar. Lift up my exposure so I can see stuff, but then protect our highlights. Like that. So just because out of the camera it looks like it's a little bit dark, let's just go 1:2. Let's go into maybe there. This is probably a little bit too soft now, so let's just pull those highlights back a little bit, pull the black down, pull our exposure maybe up a touch, bit more contrast. Maybe we lift the shadows a touch, bit of saturation. That's going to make this little bit pop here. Reason being because only one of the channels, so probably the red channel, 254, is starting to clip. But let's look at here, our shadows. Our shadows are looking a bit cold, right, compared to the rest of it. So let's go into our color balance tool, this one, find our shadows, and they're too cold at the moment, so I'm going to move that to be this side. Don't make them too green, so maybe we go to there. So they're not quite so blue, they've got a little bit of color to them. Could even actually desaturate them if we wanted to, so they can go from colorful to pretty much unsaturated. But you get the idea that it's not just about getting that one shot. Quite often you go somewhere and you think, ooh, I haven't got the conditions that I wanted. Well, it doesn't stop you shooting. Please don't put your camera away just because it wasn't what you had in your mind. But this, I like this. I've shot Durdle Door a lot, probably thousands and thousands of shots of it. And every time you can get something a little bit different. That's a little bit annoying, but anyway. So, point being, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that one shot. Another example being after the sun actually hit this cloud behind here, you get this lovely little portal coming through. Maybe we play with that in a minute as well. Also, before sunrise, we'll maybe come on to this in a second afterwards, but the most colourful time in the sky is not when the sun's up. The second the sun comes up, you're going to start blitzing basically a lot of the colour and the pastel shades. But this can also be tricky to shoot. So let's talk about this one. So you will notice that some numbers are missing. The reason that some numbers are missing is you're not seeing the one that we're actually going to produce. However, we're going to show you one that's pretty close. This one will be a good example. Let's go to a crop that is 2:3. This lends itself to be a bit more panoramic in nature than a standard sort of 4:3 that comes out of my camera. Got to debate whether I want it on the center line, whether I want it on the lower center line. That's actually a bit of a tough one because of this cloud up in the top left-hand corner, but let's have a little. I'm actually happy with it sort of sitting there, to be honest. Even though, so, rule of thirds, awful, putting it in the middle. I'm not against it in this case, anyway. So, why is this an impossible shot? Well, what I see on this beach quite often are people with graduated neutral density filters. Because it's a sunrise, right? Obviously, you should put a GND on there. That's because we try and control the light from the bright highlights in the top to the dark shadows at the bottom, because that's typically what we have in a foreground background scene at sunrise or sunset. So let's do that. Let's put a soft GND. So maybe it's about that far up. Hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, and it will keep the mask straight. And if I want to see what that mask is doing, it's doing this. So what it's doing is it's saying at this line here, 100% of whatever I'm going to do. This line 50%, midpoint, this line 0%. So in other words, anything south of this line has no impact on my chosen adjustment. So this is like a software GND. Let's imagine that I had a 3-stop GND, yeah, graduated neutral density filter, 3 stops. We know what they are: piece of glass in front of the lens, and that's obviously the right choice for this. It's a sunrise, right? So let's put our exposure. Let's be very specific. -3. Oof. So what's the problem? Well, the problem's a few things. Number one, we can move this up and down, just like you can as a filter holder. So we could say up there, that's now 100 up there. This is 50. This is 0. I want you to look at this piece of rock here. Without, with. Let's look a little bit closer. Without, details. Shadows, granted, but details. With, no details. So what's happening? Well, the issue is actually the composition of those filters themselves, which is they're darkest at in other words, most effect at the top. Then it settles down to less effect and then 0 effect at the bottom. And you can get harder GNDs. So let's go to our mask. Sorry, let's go to that one. And I could make this so you can get a hard GND rather than a soft GND. Great. So let's say put that now right on the horizon like I should do. Lovely. It's fixed the sun. But it's also fixed up here, and it's become quite apocalyptic, really. And it's also darkened completely all of our rocks. It's useless to us. It doesn't matter whether it's a soft GND or a hard GND. The metrics of this graduated filter, whether it's software or whether it's hardware, in glass terms, mean that we are not affecting the image in the way that we want. The reason that we want to affect the image differently is because the brightest part of the image is, for a start, at the horizon. It's not up here. This part of the sky is not the brightest part of the image. It doesn't make sense. And quite often when I see people using GNDs, it doesn't make sense. Look at the brightness of your image, not the composition of the shape of your image. Forget the shape. Look at where the light is. And in this case here, and in fact most sunrises, look at the light. It is not brighter here. Look at this number up here, 124, 122, 123. Down here, 250. Down here, 97. The profile of this brightness of the image is brightest on the horizon, medium at the top, darkest down below. There's not a filter for that. And there is. It's called a reverse GND, but let me show you the problem with it. In this particular case, with Durdle Door. Told you, Durdle Door is a pain. So, here's a reverse GND. So what a reverse GND does is it says we're going to have the most impact at the bottom, the midpoint, fade off at the top, and no impact down below. Perfect, right? So let's do that. Now, luckily, we can combine masks now in Capture One. So this is quite nice. So a reverse GND would look like this. So nice and soft up here. So in other words, let's go into grayscale. So most effect here, 50% here, no effect here. Let's just move that up. Great. But now I've got to make it a reverse GND. So the way that we do that is we're going to add a combine mask, new for version 16.7, that's the one. We're going to subtract. Cool, huh? A linear gradient. Create the mask. And I'm going to draw a new mask that subtracts from it. I'm going to press the shift key to keep it horizontal. I'm going to make this mask quite harsh. So look at, I've just created, by the way, a reverse GND in software. That's quite cool, yeah. So we've now got, let me just go back to seeing the image so I can do it properly. We've now got a mask, which is, so I've done this, a perfect reverse GND. In other words, the mask has its highest effect here. Its lowest effect, well, it fades out, lowest effect up here, and no effect down here. So I've now darkened the bottom part of the sky, gets gradually to nothing, and no effect down here. Perfect, right? So why does my picture look like trash? Well, a couple of things. Number one, the horizon line is never going to quite match your filter, whether it's software or hardware. Number two, we have a problem. Because while I've darkened down the sun, Great, I can see the sun nice and clearly now. And all this cloud information. Look at that over there. So I didn't have that before. Let's turn the mask off. Ooh, turn it on again. Beautiful. But I've lost all of the information in the rock. Why? Because the mask is at its greatest effect here. And then it slowly fades out. Prasad, I could use a radial gradient. No, I can't. Let's do it. So we could go to our radial gradient here. Perfect. Darken that bit. Stretch it a little bit along here. Yep, that's good. And let's pull down that exposure of that radial gradient that you've seen. Beautiful. Not. And again, you get to the same point. So whether it's a linear gradient, whether it's a reverse GND, whether it's a radial gradient, whether it's a center spot radial, it doesn't make a difference. No filter and no standard parametric filter in a raw editing piece of software is going to be able to deal with Durdle Door at sunrise in the winter. In fact, most of them can't deal with most sunrises on the horizon either. With anything sticking up, whether it's a lighthouse, whether it's a rock, whether it's a building, these filters are useless to you. So please stop putting them on automatically when you see it's a sunrise. It's almost like a sunrise filter. No. Look at the light. Look at where the brightest part is, where the darkest part is, and use the correct filter or none. Now, what you can do is use an ND filter solid to get a long exposure out of this, kind of like this equivalent. But there is no filter on this shot. So what we have in raw software, and this is where raw editing software wins compared to other stuff like physical filters, because in our raw software we have the ability to mask. So I do want to sort this sky out a little bit. So I'm going to create a quick radial mask. I'm going to turn my mask on by pressing M on the keyboard, or you can click up here. It does the same thing. I'm going to click from the horizon. And I'm going to hold down the shift key so it forces it in 45-degree increments. And I'm going to go there. So quite a hard mask. I'm now going to release that. So it's now a soft transition. But remember, I'm the wrong way round. Yeah, so this will be our standard mask. Wrong way round. The brightest part of the image is down here. So let's rotate. Good. Brightest part of the image down here, I'm affecting it the most. I'm not affecting this up here as much. Okay. Now, let's go on to my AI mask. And I'm going to erase some of it. I'm going to erase the sea. I'm going to erase the beach. I'm going to erase the rock. Oops, not erasing that much. That was a bit too much. But we're going to erase that rock. We're going to, if I can't get it to erase properly, I'm going to do that. And that. And that. And to be honest, that's good enough for me. Because now what I have is this mask. The one you can't buy in the shops, right? And I can erase if I want other little additional bits. Oops, I've got a low opacity, so let's go to 100%. So I don't want it getting confused. None of that, thank you. Now, I do want to refine it a little bit. In other words, soften the edges. So hit apply. Good. I now have a mask that affects the sky and not the actual rock formation and not the foreground. It's like a reverse GND, but clever. So with this, I can now pull down a little bit of exposure. Pretty good. It's gone a bit muddy, a little bit green. So I'm going to offset that with a bit of tint. There we go. Now there is cloud here, you see. That's the difference. And up here is the blue sky. So I'm going to create a new layer again, just because to recognize the fact there's a blue sky up there. And in that, I'm going to pull down a touch of exposure, but bring in a lot of saturation. But that brings up these yellows a bit too much. So let's go into our color editor. Could even go basic on this. Click in here. It's picked up orangey yellow. We're going to pull up some lightness. We're going to pull down some saturation. Let's leave the lightness where it was. Yellow. Pull down some saturation. Okay, what we could do is in blues, pull up some saturation and pull down some lightness. And the same with cyans. Okay, so what I've now got, if I just do before and after, it's not much of a change, but I can now see the detail in the rocks down here, the clouds up here, and I've got more of a pinwheel. It's quite nice. Let's see, that was from there to there. Okay. A couple questions then. So, could you do the same thing with a radial mask and combine with a luminosity curve, Larry? Yes, you can. The problem, again, you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to be deleting the sea. You could, though. So, in theory, because the sun is actually brightest here and then it slowly gets darker as it goes out that way, not only just a linear mask, you could actually do a radial mask and then delete from there. No problem. Yep. But you're going to have to always use some sort of shaping tool to be able to capture the stuff that you don't want to be affected by that mask. Sorry, Keith, when using the refine tool to stacking or reapplying the mask at a cleaner effect, if you refine and refine and refine, it will get a dirtier effect. So it will spread more and more and more. Sometimes we want that, but quite often we don't. So if I look at here, this was already refined, right? So let's just go into the rock. If I hit refine again and go up to 300, you see now we're starting to pick up bits of the sea, bits of the rock are being left out. You know, just be careful with it. So that's our sky conundrum sorted. What about the rock? Well, again, unless you've got a GND mask, or sorry, an ND mask, sorry, ND filter, real world, that's exactly this shape, from exactly this angle, from exactly this distance, and you marry it up exactly, you're not going to be able to do this in camera. What you need is a camera with a lovely big dynamic range. We have that, luckily, in this one. So, new layer. We'll call it rock. In fact, I should have been naming these. Double click on your layers, and we're going to call this one, in fact, it's a reverse GND from horizon. So my rock layer, AI mask. And I'm just going to keep clicking and marqueing over the bits that I want to include. Oh, too much. Undo. Let's get to there. Now, it hasn't quite got some of the beach, and I want to smooth out its transition to the beach, okay? So this is where I would use refine. Quite a big extent. There we go. Got a nice smooth transition now between them. If we've got something like in here, which I can see where we've got some sea captured, use your AI eraser, and it will start deleting that. Bit of sea going on there, that's okay. Right, so now I've got my rock individually. Well, this is easy, right? Shadows. Up. Not too much, don't do that, it looks silly. Not possible. You want to get it to within the realms of what your eyes could have seen, but probably a little bit more detail than you can get away with. So, do that. I'm going to get rid of that greeny tint again. Okay, maybe it's a bit too much. So what I'm saying too much, when we lift up our shadows, we flatten the contrast, right? It goes from here, very heavy contrast, to here. It's all been sort of mushed up a little bit. So because this is a rock layer, and we like rocks, rocks also like clarity. And because this is all now sat in the mid-tone, so you can see this big lump here, which is basically there. Pop a bit of clarity, pop a bit of structure, and you can pop a little bit of dehaze in there. And now I've got the detail of the rocks. If I do before and after, this is subtle, but I've got the detail of the rock, not too much, don't want it looking fake. I've got the sun wheel or the pinwheel of the sun coming through the arch. I've got this lovely tone along here. I've got a bit of reflection in there. That might be a little bit too hot. We could pull that back. But overall, if I were to pull in a little bit of softness on the corners, that's pretty nice. Now, this pinwheel itself, personally, I'd go a little bit further than this, which is to create a new layer, call it sun flare, create a new one of these beautiful masks, and I'm going to say, all right, I want everything in the sun flare and everything out here to be included in this mask, but I don't want the rock really to be included, so that's okay. I'm just going to go to my edit, my eraser, size nice and big, opacity down, you'll see why in a minute, and I'm just going to start erasing some, not all, some of that mask on the right, on the left hand side, sorry, because I want it to have the effect mostly on the archway itself and then out this way. And the effect that I'm looking for is to de-clarify this, make it softer. See what that did? Just in one click. From there, I can see the rosette to there, softened. Reduce its structure a little bit and add a bit of haze. Now, when you go to add the haze, you want to choose what color you want to be adding. And you don't want to take it too far as well, like this. But without, with. You see how rehaze effectively, or negative dehaze, is adding a bit of a glow. 40 is too much. Let's go to maybe sort of 15, something like that. But with those 4 layers, I've now got, and again, this isn't about making it a completely different picture, but I've got an image where I now have all the detail that I want in the rock, a soft glow coming from the sun. The image overall is warm. I can warm it up again or more, so go to the image layer, or I can click and say new field adjustment layer. We can warm up the entire scene. We can add a bit more tint into it. I'd probably back away the saturation a little bit, even though we haven't really pushed it already. Maybe to -5, something like that. Push a little bit of contrast, maybe a touch of overall shadow lifting. And that's it. That's all we get to. So from there to there, all we've done is recover the detail that you couldn't see either with your eyes or with the camera, regardless of what filter you use. Don't try and do it with a filter. You just won't be able to. You'll end up in silhouette. And silhouette's not a problem, as you've seen up here. So this is a long exposure of Durdle Door in a silhouette. This has had that shadow pulled up by 57. If I do the same on this one, we get the same thing. The temptation people have, and I'll show you what I see often here. Again, this is out of camera, right? So that is what the camera recorded. Look at our histogram. I've already got, oops, sorry, moving your screen around. You're going to get a little bit seasick if I do that. I've already got an exposure warning here. Why? Because look, I've got this little peak of highlight. So I can't make it any brighter in camera. Can't make it any darker because I'm going to lose all the detail in the shadows. So I'm stuck here. So what I see people do is this. And I see that printed on a calendar for Dorset. And I hate it. And I hope you do too. Because it's not real. It's not even accurate. It's not even close. What it does do is it shows my 2 dust spots. One there and one up there. But please don't fall for this. And please don't fall into this trap of producing this rubbish. These sort of shots where they've been overly processed, overly HDR'd to recover every bit of detail are nowhere near close, even resemblance of what was there in real life. It is normal to have contrast. It is normal to have things sat in shadow. It is normal, actually, that our eyes sometimes see things a little bit clearer than reality. I get that. But if you're pushing those sliders to the left, right, and all over the place, you're doing a discredit to that scene. That, on this scene, is probably as far as I would push this. Not any further. And actually, because of pushing it, I'd then get to a point of, on the rocks, and maybe even the beach, but let's just try it with the rocks, I'd actually be tempted to pull down saturation. You see there? So we get rid of that pink. Maybe we pull up a touch of exposure, which isn't the same as pulling up shadows. Shadows flattens and reduces contrast. Exposure just lifts linearly, which can be a better outcome. Randomly, on this long exposure, I've got a person or something there. I think I remember them. You don't own the beach. Remember that one. It's quite funny watching this stuff going on because, yeah, footprints. What is funny is when I see photographers put footprints in their own photographs and then get annoyed at themselves. That's enjoyable. But this, yeah, it's just a bit fun. So, adjustment layer up here. I'm going to click on my AI brush because in doing some of that recovery, the sky has suffered. So using my AI brush, I'm going to pull that exposure of the sky down a little bit. Maybe pull up its saturation. Maybe just shift this to be a little more back to red and blue so we get to there. But you'll see this is literally, and please take this literally, if you've gone to this and you want to go further, step away from your computer. This is what was seen. That's what you can recover. You can recover more. But, oh, don't push it too far. It's just rubbish. So, a few questions. Let's have a look. Prasad and Larry, you've covered each other's questions. That's cool. Tony, if the camera lacks the dynamic range of the IQ4, this could be a case for exposure bracketing and HDR merge, but then there's a problem with wave movement. Exactly. So, unfortunately, if you're trying to HDR bracket this, you're not going to be able to. Again, this is why it's almost like this should be like a photography exam, Durdle Door at sunrise. You can't bracket it because in between your 3 shots or 5 shots or 2 shots, the waves have moved. You could arguably bracket a long exposure, to bracket a really long exposure with a medium long exposure and hope for the best. But it's not going to work. You need dynamic range. And going back to what we've said over the last few weeks, if you're going to sacrifice anything, sacrifice your shadows. Do not sacrifice the highlights. Let them be safe. That's what's going to blow out your print. Sacrifice the shadows. You're not going to pull them up that much anyway. If you do, you've probably pushed it too far. Tony, yuck. I'm guessing you meant the cartoon version. Herb, is it normal for it is normal, sorry, for sunrise for the rocks and the beach to be in some sort of darkness? Exactly. And use it, add mood. Going back to this shot, where's that one at the end here? I love this. Everyone's fascinated with the thing through the door, but these moody shots here, I think, are much more interesting in some ways. They're less trite, less in quotes iconic, but it's lovely, but it's frustrating. That's one thing to bear in mind. Right, where are we? I still love the shot with the rocks darker, Larry. Yeah, I agree. Monochrome, you were asking. Someone was asking for what would it look like in monochrome. So right click in Capture One, clone a variant. With that variant, we are going to go down here and say enable black and white. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? I've lost all of that warmth in the sky, but it does add something. And I can make this, because in black and white, I've got the controls on color basis. So I can say anything that's yellow, make it brighter or make it darker. So because it is yellow, I can actually make that sun flare a bit more powerful. I could pull up magenta, it'll do the same thing. Reds, I think, which is the beach, yeah, so we can add in a little bit more contrast. Green, I don't think is going to have much effect. The cyan in the sky and the blue in the sky, we can do a bit with. Overall, a little bit more clarity. And yeah, you get from there to there. Which one you prefer, that's up to you. But yeah, absolutely. Don't, just because we get fixated, don't we, on sunrise? It's got to be yellow because it's a sunrise. But this is about what you remember of that time, whether it was cold, whether it was contrasted, whether it was harsh, whether it was windy. All of those things could determine whether or not you actually even do it in color. That's your call. So there you go. That was on request. Let's move on to Simon's shot, and I'm going to really upset Simon now. Sorry. Simon's question was, can we fix the heat haze? And there are 2 people in a glider there, I think. The issue is the glider has gone a little bit fuzzy, as has everything else in this frame, unfortunately. For those of you that have been watching for a long time, you'll remember David Grover and I from Capture One were in Wyoming in 2023, and we came across this. Actually, we were photographing mountains. I'm just going to crop this differently so that we can just see better on the screen what's going on. We're photographing some mountains, and you couldn't really see them properly, and it was heat haze. Now, to make sure that I'm not giving you wrong information, don't think I have to date, but we'll see. I checked in with AI. There you go. And I did it old man style, where you just ask AI a question. Heat haze is notoriously difficult to fix, but you can minimize the effect in post-processing tools like dehaze, clarity, and contrast. We'll talk about that in a second. Otherwise, you're going to look at specialist software to do it. However, I love this phrase, for truly bad heat haze, wavy lines, the best fix is prevention by shooting in cooler conditions. There you go. Easy, Simon, right? Just cool it down. Getting closer or adjusting your angle. So getting the angle isn't going to be any effect here, unfortunately, because yeah, you're way up. So heat haze basically at a distance. So you're at 300 millimeters. You're shooting through an area where there's a lot of temperature change and a lot of heat bubbling effectively from and rising from the surface. That gives us this awful, as AI would call it, wavy texture. You cannot fix this in post. So unfortunately, let's just go into here so you can see the tools that even AI is referring to. You know, let's put on some clarity, let's put on some structure, let's put on a bit of dehaze. But dehaze in Capture One's term is fog, mist, all that sort of stuff. This isn't the same thing. This is unfortunately going to be a write-off in that sense. I mean, it says it quite flippantly, but it is true. If you want to avoid heat haze, don't shoot in the heat. Remember, heat haze doesn't necessarily mean it's boiling hot. It's just that there's the temperature differential between the ground and the sky is great enough that you're seeing the heat literally escape the ground, and that's causing you ripples. You see it across a car bonnet or the metal in the car, because of its nature, because it's wavy. Oh, and could AI theoretically fix that? Yes, it could, but it would be redrawing it. So it's not going to be fixing it. It's just going to be putting pixels where it thinks they should be to make it look correct. And that's not going to be something that you're going to easily fix, especially if you're shooting across it. And this is the key thing. In this scenario here, you've got no choice, right? If you were shooting straight up to the sky to the people, well, A, they wouldn't be on there, and B, it's the wrong shot. Arguably, you know, if you were able to escape it, so maybe if you'd managed to get up to the same height as them, you know, maybe air to air, that could be a way. But in answer to your pure question, Simon, unfortunately, heat haze, once it's captured, is baked into your shot. You cannot unbake it. A bit like a cake. Can't get the eggs back. Sorry, but actually, there we go, Larry. Use it. Go for an abstract watercolor look. You know, you could. There are lots of different ways of playing with it, but unfortunately, not one that will correct it. Right, let's go on to Burn's shot. So two different shots, one taken with a Nikon, one taken with a Phase 1. And Burn's question was whether or not we can get it back to, in other words, the Phase 1 to look kind of like the Nikon one. And my challenge to you, Burn, is I think a lot of this has actually been caused by the edit rather than the camera difference. So the Nikon being a much smaller resolution camera, it's 35mm format rather than medium format, doesn't have the same dynamic range, and most importantly, it doesn't have frame averaging. So this is a 10-second exposure at ISO 64, possibly with a filter, but you know, who knows. This is a 6-second exposure at ISO 50. However, it was frame averaged for 2 minutes. So effectively, it's a 2-minute long exposure. Now, there is a problem with frame averaging when it's done at ISO 50, the base here, which is, look at these streaks down here. They are white because they are additive. This is a traditional long exposure on the Nikon. A frame average is not additive, it is mean. What I mean by that is it's a mean average. So when you get traffic trails and cars coming through, if you are at a low ISO in Phase 1 terms, for every frame of 6 seconds down here that has a car trail, there's now another frame after it without, and another frame without, and another frame without, and then one with, and then one without. The problem is that when you average that lot out, you don't end up with 255. You end up a lot lower, sort of 223. And the red is seen by the sensor more than the green. So what you end up with is this magenta trail, which is a problem. This is a good old sign of low ISO frame averaging. If you want to avoid this, you need to be frame averaging at about ISO 200 for traffic trails to be able to get around it. What it also, and it's up here as well, you can see, what it also means is that when you recover things like this, look at the before, nice spinny wheel, right? We like these, they look fun. This one looks technically more interesting, but it doesn't have that motion, doesn't have the movement. And the problem is this is what happens when you do too much recovery. So I'm actually going to start this in a different way. I'm going to say new variant, completely new. Going to go into my lens tool and going to say lens correction, turn on diffraction correction. At f10 at 150, we've probably got some in there. Turn on a little bit of sharpness fall off. Don't need to worry about distortion at that. I'm going to cool down this image a little bit. 5000's pretty punchy. So let's cool it down. Interesting, why is it 5000 and 0? What's our pure? They actually shot it as at daylight, okay. So auto white balance normally would give you a slightly different value away from 5000 or so. This is shot at daylight. I'm going to lift up the shadows by quite a long way. I'm going to protect the highlights, but not too much. So look down here. Remember these trails. If I start protecting the highlights, they go magenta. Why? Because that's the color that Capture One saw. Sorry, that your Phase One camera saw and recorded in your raw file. So because there was more red and in theory blue a little bit recorded. So if we're going to fix this, unfortunately, we need a mask. And it's a very simple one. We're just going to draw a really, really rough mask. Where are we? Brush. Very soft mask. Just that width there. Just turn on our layer so I can see it. Into there. I mean, the fix for this is so obvious that you can't sort of unsee it. But anyway, let's get on to there. Try and avoid this red stuff over here because of what we're about to do. Full opacity. Just erase that mask. Oops, sorry, too much. Erase the mask over the red traffic trails. We want to keep them. Is that the only bit we've got? Yeah, pretty much. That's okay there. Good. Right, with those masks, this is really simple. Color editor. If you didn't know, it's pink. Saturation down, lightness up. Now, unfortunately, that's got a little bit of a weird pattern on it. Why? Because this isn't all completely pink. So let's not do it in our basic, we do it in advanced. And we say, right, I want this color, doesn't matter which one you pick, and anything left and right of it, including the stuff that's fully saturated. Smooth fall off, so we don't see that digital almost nature of the edge. Pull down its saturation, pull up its lightness. Now we have our traffic trails back. And if I look over here, same thing will have happened. So we go from there to there. Cool, right? Now what that's meant is, oops, I clicked somewhere else on the picture. Let's just delete that color range. Right, what it's meant is that we've now got our traffic trails back. We've still left this wheel where it is. And I don't want to really change that. If anything on that wheel, I mean, let's have a little bit of fun. Let's go into my old trusty manual brush. I do like manual brushes. People have shied away from them recently. They need them all to be AI or magic or auto. Let's go back to old school. So, there's my brush. Highlights. Let's pump them up a bit. I can pull back white, which gets me the strands. So look at what I've done. I've lifted the upper midtones and the brighter parts of the image, but I've pulled the very brightest parts down a little bit. So this just makes it pop a little bit. We could also add in here a bit of clarity, which further makes it pop. A little bit of structure. Good. Then overall, this just feels like it needs to be brighter in the shadows, right? So image layer. We've already done a shadow lift here, but it's the black area that's the darkest. Let's pull that up just a touch. And then I'm going to go into thinking about what our temperature needs to look at. So I'm going to cool it down even more. I'm going to get rid of that green tint a little bit. And then go down into my color balance tool and think about what do I want the shadows to look like? What do I want the midtones? What do I want the highlights to look like? My highlights I'd like to be a bit warmer, I think. Not green, so if they go there, it's horrible. But they could go to maybe there. And a little bit more bright. Midtones. Well, not green. Maybe they go to there, but not as saturated. And again, lifting a little bit. And then shadows. Well, shadows, I could have some fun. I mean, they don't have to be that way. So maybe we make them a little bluer. But we lift them. Ooh, no, we don't. See, we don't always get it right. I'm just going to pull in that saturation a little bit. So then I go from this shot to this shot, this one being the Nikon one. And what's the biggest difference with these two? Well, one of them is actually our overall brightness of the image. Look at where our data sits in here and where it sits in the Nikon. Well, that's an easy fix. We have a curve for that. So here's our curve. And I'm going to leave it on RGB because I want actually the colors to change in the saturation. But I'm just going to lift our midtones here, protect our highlights. I don't want them to change. And leave shadows there. But we're almost building in like a weird S-curve that just boosts everything in this picture. I can afford, in this case now, to pull up a little bit more shadow. I can, oops, don't accidentally click a curve. I can afford to push overall in the picture a load more clarity. I can afford to do a little bit of dehaze, and we can get rid of some of the shadow work in here. And then overall, this purple doesn't really quite sit right with me, so I'm going to go to the master. We know that it's sitting over here, so I'm just going to pull it away from being purple, not there, but maybe to there. Now I like actually up here, the brightness up here. The blue up there, sorry, just to be very specific. I like this down here, but I've lost this blue up in the distance. That's annoying. And it's not just that, because I've also got these three-way changes. If only I could mask my image layer. Well, I can. So I'm going to move all of those adjustments to a new layer, the image layer. So this is moved from here, and I'm going to say this is color balance. And I'm going to spell it right. And then we're going to erase up the top. Not all of it. So we're going to go to there, very soft brush. And we're going to put down maybe a 30% opacity. And I'm just going to erase the impact up here. So now I've got some depth in the city. And I could also erase down here these shadows. So I'm pushing the viewer to see this as the key part of this image. So this is the Nikon one. It's a different shot to a certain extent. It's a wider crop. This is the Phase 1 version. This is the one that you've edited from Phase 1. And I would say this goes a bit too far. If you want to use filters, and I know you did Burnt on the original one. So if I go to my custom styles, this one I think you tried to use it Vivacity 4, which is max range. That really pumps it. Instead, I'd be tempted to use the one that pulls up shadows. Yeah, let's have a look. So my Vivacity layer here, and I just pull it away. So you're only putting in maybe 20%. You can also afford, remember, to lift up brightness more, bit more exposure. But every time you do exposure, remember to pull that highlight down to protect the wheel. So it goes from that to there, which is pretty nice. But this is all about just tweaking. This is probably too far, especially with the magenta trails and stuff like that. But this one here, this just feels a bit more again, it's about capturing what was really there. And if you're worried about like the town in here trying to get this detail back, I mean, yeah, you can pull it back. Let's just pull back highlights, look. So you can do that, and you can pull the white back, and you can see a bit more detail. That's without, that's with. But my gut feel is we want these things to glow, a bit like the sun through Durdle Door. You know, we want, if this is a glowing wheel, let's have it as a glowing wheel. Let's use that. And even so, in that wheel, remember, you've got a red, right? So what if we pick on this red and we saturate it a bit more? There we go. Even darken that red. Make it a bit more fun. This is down to what you remember of being there, remember. So, but let's just turn that off and on, That's a bit more standout, right? And that's the beauty of this, which is that phase one image you've got will be able to be pulled in so many different ways that the Nikon one may not be. I'm not saying it can't, but it may not be. You've got so much latitude in this, but if I compare it to there, this just feels way too neon, way too hot, way too crunchy, too contrasty. Here, that just feels so much more real. That would be it. Now, one question that just came up. Where are we? Would match look do any good? So let's just create a new variant. So this is an option. In our tools here, we have match look. I'm going to grab the Nikon version from behind my head. This is our reference. Go to our phase one image and say use selected variants. I'm going to leave it all as default just for now, just to see. And then go apply. No. No. Oh, I wouldn't even say it's close, unfortunately. And that's with it allowed to change light and color. I don't know why, but yeah. So that's what Matchlook thinks that the phase one file should be. I think it should be there. It's my view. May not be right, but that's where I get to. Right. All that said, because I've just seen the time, and the plane is not going to wait for me. So that was today. That's actually this year. Isn't that fun? So that's Burnt's city shot. There's a couple of things there with traffic trails that we can fix. This is probably pushing it a bit too far. You can push this further, but just be careful with it. Simon, this one, bad news. No, you can't really fix the heat haze once it's baked in. As someone mentioned earlier, maybe have an unbaked slider, but yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And then this one, Durdle Door, it's just, forget the fact it's Durdle Door, it's an example of just be really careful. When you're capturing sunrises and sunsets and, wonderful places, they don't have to always be completely visible of everything in the visible visible range of the human eye, or beyond even. You can just leave it more natural, and you should, because these things look cool when they're left natural, right? Right, that's it for this year. As I say, we'll be back next month. It'll be put on the Facebook group, that one, and it'll also be on our website. In between now and then, you've still got access to the masterclasses. You can do that. You can access all the old masterclasses. There's a link in the description down below. Look after yourselves. For those of you that do Christmas, enjoy. For those of you that don't, like me, because I'm just avoiding it and going to the beach and having a barbecue, we'll see you on the other side. Between now and then, take care. See you. Bye.